Sale of Eiffel Tower. Victor Lustig, a man later called one of the greatest con artists of the 20th century. His plan was so insane it could only either collapse completely or become a legend. He decided to sell the Eiffel Tower. Not a piece of metal, not a souvenir, the entire 300-meter giant. And the craziest part, he actually pulled it off. Victor posed as a government official from the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He prepared flawless forged documents, booked a luxurious hotel for the meetings to make everything look official. Then he gathered a group of respectable businessmen and told them that the French government was secretly planning to dismantle the tower for scrap metal. The upkeep was too expensive, he said, and the country needed the money. Each businessman wanted to be the chosen one, so they didn't just negotiate. They started dropping hints about bribes to make sure the deal went to them. In the end, one of them bought the tower and even slipped Victor a bribe on top of it. And when, a few days later, he realized he had been scammed, it was already too late. Victor was long gone with the money. And here's the funniest part. He did it twice. After the first successful con, he returned to Paris and ran the exact same scheme on another group of businessmen. That took nerves of steel. After the first sale, half the city could have been looking for him, yet he calmly played round two. Lustig would go on to pull many more tricks, but this story alone secured his place in the Hall of Fame of con artists. Fake lands. Gregor McGregor announced that he had discovered a brand new country in Central America, Hoax, and not just some patch of jungle, but a full-on utopia. He painted it as a land where rivers sparkled with gold, forests yielded endlessly, and the climate was perfect for life. He even printed official-looking brochures with a coat of arms and a map that made this paradise look completely real. People believed him. Investors bought government bonds of Hoax. Families sold their belongings to move to the New World, where land and prosperity supposedly awaited them. In fact, several ships full of hopeful settlers actually sailed from Britain straight to this so-called promised land. But when they arrived, the truth hit hard. Hoax didn't exist. All they found were empty jungles. Meanwhile, McGregor was back in Europe, comfortably counting his money. The scam was so massive that he was branded one of the most dangerous conmen of his era. And the wildest part? He almost completely escaped punishment. Tulip Mania. Holland, the 1630s. The country was thriving. People were getting rich, looking for new places to invest their money. And suddenly, a new craze appeared. Tulips. A simple flower from the Ottoman Empire turned into a symbol of prestige, but it didn't stop at just a pretty flower in the garden. Madness followed. The rarer the variety, the higher the price. Bulbs were traded for horses, carriages, plots of land, even houses in the center of Amsterdam. Special exchanges popped up where people traded contracts for bulbs that hadn't even been dug up yet. It was all running on promises. Today, you bought the right to a flower. Tomorrow, you sold it for more. People got hooked, like gamblers in a modern casino or investors riding a crypto boom. And then, bang, the market collapsed. One day, the prices stopped rising, panic spread, and everyone realized they were left holding bulbs that were now worth pennies. People who had been wealthy yesterday woke up bankrupt. This crash went down in history as the world's first financial bubble. Great Diamond Hoax. America. The 1870s. Investors were hungry for easy money. And then two friends appeared on the stage, Philip Arnold and John Slack. Clever, bold, and endlessly inventive. They claim to have accidentally stumbled upon a massive deposit of precious stones somewhere in the Colorado desert. To make their story convincing, they pulled off something brilliantly simple. They bought a handful of diamonds and rubies from jewelers, then scattered them across the desert themselves. After that, they invited investors to see for themselves. Look, the gems are literally sticking out of the ground. Riches at your feet. The investors took the bait. Big names started getting involved. Wall Street bankers, powerful businessmen, even the legendary Rothschild family through its agents put money into the scheme. After all, how could anyone miss the chance to own a brand new El Dorado? Money poured in. Arnold and Slack raked in more and more, while people around them dreamed of how quickly they were going to become rich. But the happiness didn't last long. When real geologists were finally sent to investigate, they discovered the truth. Yes, the stones were genuine, but they had been planted by hand. There was no diamond field. It was just sand, sprinkled with jewels bought from a shop. The scandal exploded across the country. Investors lost fortunes, and the so-called Great Diamond Field became a national embarrassment. Arnold and Slack, of course, had already taken most of the money and vanished. The episode went down in history as one of the most dazzling cons of the 19th century. Biggest New York tenant. New York, the early 20th century. George Parker would become famous for selling the one thing you couldn't possibly sell. His favorite scheme was so bold it sounds impossible. Parker sold New York landmarks, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Statue of Liberty, even Madison Square Garden. You could buy them all from him. He played the role of an official city representative, showed forged documents, and convinced gullible buyers that they were getting a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Legend has it that after one of these sales, a newly minted owner of the Brooklyn Bridge actually tried to set up toll gates to charge people for crossing. The police had to step in and explain that the bridge had never been private property. And this wasn't some one-off stunt. Parker pulled it off for decades. He was so convincing that even experienced businessmen fell for his tricks. For him, New York wasn't a city of opportunities. It was a city full of products just waiting to be sold. Eventually, the law caught up with him and he was sentenced. Owner of Moon. USA, the 1950s. The world was full of post-war optimism. People were dreaming about space, sci-fi writers filled pages with future missions to Mars, and someone started thinking, what if all of this could be privatized? Enter an American named Dennis Hope, who decided that space was free territory, which meant he could claim it as his own. In 1980, he spotted a loophole in international law. Space treaties stated that no country could own the moon or other planets, but there was not a single word about individual citizens. So what did Hope do? He sent a declaration to the UN and the US government, registering ownership of the moon and every planet in the solar system, except Earth, since, as he joked, it was already taken. He never got a reply, but he didn't get a refusal either, and that was enough for him to launch a business. That's how the Lunar Embassy was born. For just a few dozen dollars, anyone could buy a certificate for a plot on the moon. It looked like a gag gift, but thousands of people signed up. Even celebrities, actors, politicians, businessmen bought their little piece of lunar real estate. Hope was selling a dream, and he sold it for years. Of course, these property rights had zero legal value, but the fact that people willingly paid for a slice of the moon makes this one of the funniest and most outrageous scams in modern history. In the end, Dennis Hope earned himself the nickname the Moon King. Painting nobody painted. The 2000s. The art world was going crazy with record-breaking auctions. Masterpieces were selling for tens of millions. Collectors were fighting for the chance to own a unique canvas, and galleries were desperate to showcase the next big sensation. That's when a group of con artists appeared, thinking, if the demand is this huge, why not simply create masterpieces that never actually existed? They tracked down old canvases from the 17th to 19th centuries, stripped the paint, and then painted new works in the style of Rembrandt, Matisse, or Pollock. They used antique frames, pigments from past centuries, and even artificially aged the paint to make everything look convincing. The forgeries were so good they passed expert inspections and ended up at major auctions. Collectors spent millions believing they were buying lost masterpieces. Some of the works were even proudly displayed in prestigious museums. The con artists laughed because they weren't really selling art. They were selling a perfectly forged story. When the scam was finally uncovered, the art world exploded in scandal. Dozens of paintings in private collections and even in museums turned out to be fakes. Some wealthy buyers stubbornly refused to accept the truth, because admitting it meant their multi-million-dollar investments were nothing more than a piece of cheap canvas. Imaginary inventions. The 1910s, a time when technological progress was transforming the world before everyone's eyes. Cars were becoming mainstream, the first airplanes were taking to the skies, and people believed in science almost like it was magic. And right then, swindlers appeared who decided, if the world is ready to believe in miracles, it's time to cash in. They sketched out revolutionary machines, perpetual motion engines that ran without fuel, teleportation devices, or contraptions that could turn water into gasoline. They gathered investors, showed off strange models filled with gears and wires, and tossed around scientific jargon that almost nobody actually understood. Investors, blinded by greed and their faith in science fiction, poured in money, a lot of money. Some sold their businesses, others took out loans, all hoping to be the first to buy a ticket to the future. The funniest part? The con men almost never finished their projects. They collected the funds and disappeared. Investors were left with stacks of papers, blueprints, and promises of a breakthrough. These stories proved one thing: the greatest resource for fraudsters isn't money, it's human trust and the dream of an easy solution to hard problems. That's all for today. Thank you for watching the video to the end. With these tips, you can watch our other videos.